The first writers in residence came to the James Merrill House 25 years ago, shortly after James Merrill's death in 1995. Since then, over 80 writers have visited, staying in his home, a National Historic Landmark, to work on projects of their own. Thanks to Merrill's generosity, the house now belongs to the Stonington Village Improvement Association and is an ongoing inspiration for writers and poets from around the world. For more information, visit our website, jamesmerrillhouse.org. Thank you.
Welcome and good evening. Welcome to the James Merrill House Writers in Residence Reading Series. I'm Jeffrey Little, committee member on the Merrill House, and which is a project of the Stonington Village Improvement Association, as you heard in the video. We're now in our 25th year and have hosted some almost 90 authors in every genre, poetry, of course, but also nonfiction, essays, criticism, biography, memoir, and fiction, which we'll hear tonight. Each writer has come to live and work for a time in James Merrill's home here at 107 Water Street in Stonington, Connecticut. To learn more about Merrill and our programs, please visit jamesmerrillhouse.org. And if you're so moved, you may make a donation there via PayPal. Also, you can see one of our newer efforts, Studio 107, which are recorded short videos in which some of our past writers in residence discuss their new work. And those are on our YouTube channel and Facebook channel as well. Finally, before I introduce our author, I'd like to thank our community who have kept us going with financial contributions in this year of pandemic. And to my fellow Merrill committee members, 20 very hands-on, hardworking volunteers who take care of the building, the apartment, the writers, the residency, the fundraising, finances, communications, and much more. Thank you all. So tonight, a very special occasion for us. Our current writer in residence, Kirstin Valdez Quade, will be giving a preview of her debut novel, The Five Wounds, which will be published on March 30th, just a couple of weeks. It's very exciting indeed to have her here at the very moment her book will be out. She will be, in a few short weeks, a novelist. So congratulations, Kirstin, from all of us at the Merrill House. This is actually Kirstin's second time in Stonington, as she was here with writer-in-residence Lydia Conklin in 2012. So I should say, welcome back. Kirstin comes to us now as an acclaimed writer of short stories, gathered in her first volume, Night at the Fiestas, published by W.W. Norton. It was the winner of the National Book Critics Circle John Leonard Award and a New York Times Notable Book of the Year in 2015, among many other accolades. And while I'm usually wary of author blurbs, I'd like to read one or two, actually. The first from novelist Andre Dubus III. He said, "Night at the Fiestas cuts deeper than a Teano love ballad, burns like hot wind down an arroyo, soothes like cayenne and agave, and what gifted Kirstin Valdez Quade gives us so freely, heart and compassion illuminated." As you might surmise from that quote and my feeble Spanish pronunciation, Kirstin's fictional world is grounded in the Southwest, specifically her home place of New Mexico. Her New Mexico is a crucible where individual desires forged, lost, and reconstituted amid a backdrop of colliding histories and culture. The result is as close to flesh and blood as black ink on white paper can come. She is a story writer of searing vision. Those are not my words, but those of another novelist, Anthony Mara. So Kirstin, welcome. I hope you didn't mind me reading some of your fan mail out loud.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. It's such a joy to be here. Thank you for that introduction.
Oh, well, thank you. I thought we'd have a little conversation first before we turn to your reading. I had to talk about you and your work. We always like to get to know our writers as much as we can. Your stories in your new novel are focused on New Mexico, and you describe the landscape and the people there so vividly. It takes me back there when I read your work, which is a place I love. Tell us what New Mexico means to you. I know it's a lot, but
Yeah, I mean, I'm from New Mexico. I was born in Albuquerque, and all of my extended family lives in Santa Fe and little towns around there. And I spend a lot of time there. I'm really close to my grandparents and my great aunt, and I try to get back as often as I can. I think this year is one of the longest periods I've been away from them. So.
And your family was hit hard by COVID, your extended family.
Yeah, sadly, my grandfather passed away in October. So that's been a real loss. And
yeah. And you had dedicated Night at the Fiestas to him and some of your other elders.
Yeah. They, yeah. I mean, I've been really lucky to be so close to them and to spend so much time with them, and they've always been really generous with all of my nosy questions. So,
are they part of a storytelling tradition? Is there an oral history tradition in your family?
I don't know. I mean, maybe a reluctant oral history. I feel like the details have been, I have to work for them.
Right. So you have imagined them. Well, thankfully, you've been safe through the pandemic, and wish the rest of your family well. In contrast to that strong sense of place that you have and that you create in your fictional world, growing up, I understand you had an unusually peripatetic life. You traveled through the American Southwest extensively with your mother and your father, a geologist, and you told me you didn't have a TV and no money for movies, so interested in how that sort of shaped you. And despite those sort of disadvantages, you had adventures in Australia and elsewhere and living rough on the road. My question is your fiction so rooted in this one place, as we'll hear in a bit, and your family and tradition, and is that kind of a counterbalance for you to that early life of moving everywhere?
Oh, I think absolutely. I mean, from the time we moved away when I was a kid, I think part of me was waiting and expecting to move back, and I always had this very strong sense that was home and that was where I belonged. And in all of those moves, that was the home we returned to most consistently. We always went back to my grandmother's house. And so yeah, and she's been in her same house for 65 years or something.
Yeah. And you said even as your plane comes into ABQ, could you have a strong feeling?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when the plane descends, I feel something just open in my heart, and every time I don't realize that I've been tense and waiting for my arrival.
Can you fill in just a few dots for us of from that peripatetic childhood to university to after?
Well, I first studied writing in college. I took my first workshops in college, and I was really pardon?
At Stanford?
At Stanford, yeah. And I was really afraid to take that first workshop. I didn't.
Just had you not written before, or was it new to you?
I'd always written on my own. I'd always read. I mean, through all that time on the road, and I read and read and read. No, I think it felt really scary to take a creative writing workshop. It felt like maybe it wasn't something that was for me or something I could do. And gosh, I'm so glad that I finally did. I'm still in touch with some of those people I met in that very first workshop. And And it gave me a sense that, this was a possibility. For the first time, I had a clearer sense of what, a writer's life might look like. I met, some of the wonderful creative writing faculty and saw, these working writers.
Sure, Tobias Wolff and others. Wonderful experience. And then a few years later, you came back as a Stegner Fellow.
I did, and that was a really wonderful chance to spend 2 years working on my fiction and getting incredible feedback from really smart writers.
Yeah. And then for the last 5 years, you've been teaching undergrads creative writing, so turning to teaching yourself, and at the Lewis Center at Princeton. So does that feel like home now, a new home after 5 years?
I think home's going to be New Mexico, but it's really a wonderful place, and my students are just such a joy, and it's one of the great gifts of my life to be able to spend my days talking about literature with these really engaged students who care about characters, and to get to spend time with their manuscripts.
Well, let's turn to The Five Wounds, which originated from a short story of the same title. It's in Night at the Fiestas, originally published in The New Yorker in 2009. Can you tell us a bit about how that grew into a novel?
Sure. So when I wrote the story and it came out, I thought I was done with it. I thought of it as a story, and it had sort of the energy of a story. It was published, and I was ready to move on to new stories. And about a year after it was published, I got an email from an editor who is now my editor at Norton. And she asked me if I'd ever considered extending it into a novel. And I thought, absolutely not. Why would I do that? And also, why does everyone want a novel? Stories are excellent. So
you really made that editor's day. She thought she had this, okay, brainstorm.
I didn't say that to her. I was very polite.
Sure.
So I set that aside. And then about a year after that, I was looking at some story drafts that I was working on, and none of them, there were about 3 stories that were not working. And I was kind of, leafing through them. And all of a sudden it occurred to me that these 3 stories were all dealing with essentially the same constellation of characters, essentially the same family dynamics. There was this woman and her grown son and their codependent relationship, and then his estranged daughter who comes on the scene. And I thought, oh my goodness, maybe I actually am writing a novel. And so that summer, I gave it a shot. I decided that I would spend that summer seeing if this idea had legs.
Well, with that, we'll turn it over to you, and we'll hear some of the forthcoming novel.
Great. Thank you so much.
Of course.
I'm just so incredibly grateful to be here at the James Merrill House. It's a dream. I mean, I'm sitting right here at his milk glass Ouija board table, and this is where I've been working. So I am going to be reading from my new novel, The Five Wounds, which is coming out in 2 weeks. So I thought I would read a brief section from the very beginning, which is in Amadeo's point of view, and then a brief section from his daughter's point of view. This year, Amadeo Padilla is Jesus. The hermanos have been preparing in the dirt yard behind the morada. This is no silky-haired, rosy-cheeked, honey-eyed Jesus, no Jesus of the children, Jesus with the lambs. Amadeo is muscled, hair shaved close to his scalp, scarred from teenage fights. Amadeo is building the cross out of heavy, rough oak instead of pine. He's barefoot, like the other hermanos who have rolled their cuffs and sing alabados. He holds the hammer with both hands high above his head, brings it down with a crack. The boards bounce. The sound strikes off the outside wall of the Morada and across the alley, the Idle Hour cantina. Amadeo has broken out in a sweat. He sweats, but not usually from work. He sweats when he eats. He sweats when he drinks too much. 33 years old, same as our Lord, but Amadeo is not a man with ambition. Even his mother will tell you that, though it breaks her heart to admit it. Yolanda still cooks for him, setting a plate before him at his place at the table. Though Amadeo has lived in Las Penas his whole life, today he sees the village anew. The lines are sharper, the colors purer. The weeds along the edge of the fence, the links of the fence itself, the swaying tops of the cottonwood trees, everything is in preternatural focus. The Morada is lit by the sun sinking orange at his back, the line sharp between cinder block and sky. He brings the hammer down, hitting each nail true, enjoying the oiled rotation of his joints, the fatigue in his muscles. He feels righteous and powerful, his every movement predetermined. He feels born for the role. Then he pounds the last nail, and he's back in his body, and the hermanos are wrapping up, heading home. When Amadeo pulls up the gravel drive to the house, his daughter Angel is sitting on the steps, 8 months pregnant. She lives in Española with her mom. He hasn't seen her in more than a year, but he's heard the news from his mother, who heard it from Angel. White tank top, black bra, gold cross pointing the way to her breasts in case you happen to miss them. Belly as hard and round as an orno. The buttons of her jeans are unsnapped to make way for its fullness, and also to indicate how this happened in the first place. Her birthday is this week, falls on Good Friday. She'll be 16. Shit, Amadeo says and yanks the parking brake. This last week was the most important week in Jesus' life. This is the week everything happened. So Amadeo's mind should be trained on sacrifice and resurrection, not his daughter's teenage pregnancy. She must not see his expression because she gets up, smiles, and waves with both hands. The rosary swings on his rearview mirror, and Amadeo watches as beyond it, his daughter advances on the truck, stomach out thrust. She pauses, half turns, displays her belly. I'm fat, huh? I barely got these pants, and already they're too small. Hey. He pats his daughter's back gingerly between her bra straps, then steps away. What's happening, he says. It's too casual, but he can't afford to let her think she's welcome, not during Passion Week and with his mother away. Ugh, me and Mom got in a fight, so I told her to drive me here. Her tone is light. I didn't know where you and Grandma were. I've been here like 2 hours, starving my head off. Pregnant people need to eat. I almost broke in just to make a sandwich. Don't you guys check your phones? Amadeo hooks his thumb in his pockets, looks up at the house, then back at the road. The sun is gone now, the dusk a nearly electric blue. A fight? In spite of himself, Amadeo takes some pleasure in Angel's indignation at her mother. Marissa has always made him feel insufficient. I can't even, whatever, she says with conviction. What me and the baby need right now is a support system. That's what I told her. Amadeo shakes his head. I'm real busy, he says, like an actor portraying regret. Now's not a good time. Angel doesn't look hurt, just interested. Why, you got a job or something? She lifts her duffel and begins to walk toward the door, swaying under the weight of luggage and belly. My mom's not here, he calls. He's embarrassed to tell her the real reason he wants her gone, embarrassed by the fervor that being a penitente implies. Where'd Grandma go? There's real worry in her voice. She holds the screen open with her hip, waiting for him to unlock the door. Listen, it's a busy week. He rushes this next part, his breath short. I'm carrying the cross this year. I'm Jesus. Okay, she'll be back soon, right? Yolanda took her vacation after the end of the legislative session, right before Holy Week, exactly when Amadeo needs her most. Maybe I'll just stay there forever, she told him lightly as she packed. I love Vegas, the shows, the lights, the commotion. She didn't say when she'd be back, end of next week, probably. Angel heaves her duffel and purse on the kitchen floor with a dramatic sigh, and only then does it occur to Amadeo that he should have carried the bag in for her, but she doesn't seem to notice. She's still talking. I told my mom, whatever, I'm going to Grandma's then. She loves me. So this next section is in Angel's point of view, and this takes place at Smart Starts, which is the teen parent program she attends. Angel pinches the underside of her chin as she thinks. It's journaling time, and Brianna has told them to make a list of things they each need to make their own and their babies' lives better. The first few are easy. 1, GED or high school diploma and college degree. 2, a support system. 3, a car. 4, a driver's license. 5, a job. Here, Angel is stumped. If she got a job, who would take care of the baby? So she adds 6, free babysitter, a good one. But there's no such thing, not really, not unless your mom or grandma doesn't work. Even Angel knows that. Briefly, she considers her father, then dismisses the thought. Across the room, Christy and Trinity are whispering. They are best friends and knew each other from before Smart starts. We got pregnant like the same month, they're always telling people, which is either a crazy fluke or an organizational feat. Both possibilities depress Angel. Who'd like to share, asks Brianna. Today she wears her clunky sandals and a shapeless maroon sweater dress. Jen raises her hand, tucking her silky, mousy hair behind her large white ear, preparing herself for the stage. An education. Jen smiles, anticipating Brianna's praise. Right, drawls Lizette. Education. I forgot that one. On her left hand, Jen wears a promise ring with a dinky little amethyst. It's my birthstone, she said, as if none of the rest of them were born in months with birthstones. She is going to marry her boyfriend, whom she met at church and who picks her up every afternoon when Smart starts lets out. Angel's stomach churns whenever she thinks of her own child's father, Ryan Johnson. The way, in geometry, he always sat in the front row, grimacing up at the board. He'd always raised his hands to answer questions, but was only correct about 50% of the time. It seemed crazy to Angel to keep putting yourself out there like that. But the next time Mrs. Esposito asked a question, there he was, long, skinny arms swinging in the air. Hey, he told her breathlessly, once in the hall after class. I thought of a name for you, a math name. For weeks he called her Angle, or sometimes, delighting himself still further, obtuse Angle. He was so persistent she felt embarrassed for him, which, along with the tequila, explains why she slept with him. Her embarrassment also explains, perhaps, why she hasn't told him the baby is his. Angel's back aches, her legs ache. She has to pee every 4 seconds. She's a manatee. She doesn't know how she can stand to get any bigger. Jen sits up straighter in her seat and her frown deepens. Speaking directly to Brianna, she says, for success, I also need to maintain my relationship with Jesus and make my baby have one too. Angel pictures Jen forcing a recalcitrant toddler into the arms of a horrified Jesus. The Jesus looks exactly like her dad, and she laughs out loud. Brianna catches Angel's eye and betrays the tiniest smile, and Angel's cheeks heat. Thanks, Jen, says Brianna, and writes education on the whiteboard, the felt tip marker squeaking. Jen's parents are still together and teach at the community college where Jen, their only child, can go for basically free once she gets her GED. They've already started a college fund for Jen's baby. Could you please put up the part about Jesus? Jen strokes her tidy belly through her pink striped maternity shirt. I've been entrusted with this beautiful little life, and if I'm going to be a success, I need to love and care for it as Jesus loves and cares for me. Lizette snorts. Was Jesus loving and caring for you when you were bumping uglies with that dumb boyfriend of yours? Lizette, warns Brianna, syllables clipped, but a surge of dislike has already been unleashed among the members of the class. You're not special, Jen, says Christy. Yeah, says Trinity, we're all Christians here. Ooh, umbers, sing-songs Lizette. Jen's getting taught. No, says Jen, face flushing. Like half of you are Catholics, and Catholics aren't Christian. Exactly. Are you joking? Angel surprises herself with her cry of incredulity. But after all, she is something of an expert after her father's Good Friday shenanigans. Anyone who believes in Christ is a Christian. It's the main definition. Now Lizette looks over her shoulder at Angel and gives a wry half smile. Angel's happiness is like a ball popping to the surface of a clean pool. It bobs there, glinting in the sunlight. That is true, says Brianna. And anyway, I'm agnostic. But girls, let's please stay on task. What's something else you can do to make your future better? Sleep, says Tabitha sadly. Age 17 and due next month. already possessed of a 19-month-old who is known in the baby room for his powerful lungs and disinclination to nap. I never get no sleep. Good, yes, sleep is essential, self-care in general. Other thoughts? Yesenia raises her hand. Brianna nods encouragingly. Yesenia. Marry a rich guy, she says. This sounds good to Angel. Her mother once told her it's just as easy to fall in love with a rich guy as a poor one. Not that Marissa would know. Along with the rest of his personality deficiencies, Mike isn't rich. The problem, her mother conceded with a sigh, is meeting one. Angel starts to add rich guy to her own list, but catches Brianna's expression. Instead of that smile of bright approval with which she usually rewards classroom participation, Brianna presses her lips and gives an equivocating waggle of the head. Marry a rich guy is, apparently, the wrong answer. Well, Brianna says, that's one thought, Yesenia. I like that you're thinking of the practicals, of how to get the resources you need to live day to day. But if you're dependent on someone else for those things, then you aren't developing the skills you need to provide for yourself. And if that rich guy, I don't know, leaves or dies or divorces you or proves to be a bad partner so that you have to leave him, then you're right back where you started. But he'd have to give me alimony, Yesenia points out. He'd have to pay child support. Sure, snorts Christy, scratching flakes of neon orange nail polish off her stubby thumbnail. Because guys pay child support. Guys are super at that. He'd be rich. Of course he'd pay. It would be no big deal if he was rich. If he was rich, Christy says, he'd have lawyers and he'd know how to get out of it. You wouldn't see a cent. She goes back to denuding her nails. True, chimes Trinity. Brianna's head is tilted thoughtfully. Angel presumes she is trying to work out how to validate Yesenia's point and at the same time crush it and move on. The girls are aware that Brianna handles them with kid gloves, acknowledges points of view that are foolish or plain wrong, lets slip pretty gaping lapses of logic just to instill in them some sense of self-efficacy. Sometimes they say dumb stuff on purpose, just to watch her perform the intellectual acrobatics necessary to at once validate and correct. It can be very entertaining. Angel is pretty sure they're all imagining this man in his slim wool suit and narrow black shoes, looking like a Banana Republic model, and it strikes her as unfair that they're passing these judgments on him just because he's square-jawed with soft focus eyes and a leather wallet filled with platinum cards. Angel also feels sorry for Yesenia, having to defend what is objectively a good idea. Because who's to say Mr. Banana Republic would definitely be a dick? He might be decent. And they're all speaking hypothetically anyway. Any discussion of their futures is by definition hypothetical. So why not let Yesenia marry some hypothetical rich guy who happens not to be a dick? If they're going to be strictly realistic, then yes, Mr. Banana Republic probably has other plans for his life than taking care of Yesenia and her not very attractive 8-month-old infant. And if by some miracle Yesenia does convince him to marry her, then yes, it's probably just a matter of months before he screws her over. But if they're going to be strictly realistic, then they might as well acknowledge that number 7 on Angel's list, a job, is unlikely to end up being the kind of job that will cover food, rent, health insurance, childcare, utilities, and car payments, and also allow her to sock 10% away into her savings account, at least not at first. Angel tries to get up the courage to defend Yesenia. After all, Brianna has told them that it takes a village and don't underestimate the power of community. And remember, people are resources too. But the thought of contradicting Brianna makes her nervous. Lizette takes a long drink from her water bottle before dropping it hard on the desk. The gesture isn't aggressive, simply careless, but it's loud. You're the one who said we had to get us a support system, miss, says Lizette. I don't see what's the matter with getting a rich support system. Yes, thinks Angel, vindicated. Her point exactly. There's nothing the matter with it, Lizette. Please raise your hand. I hope you'll all be fulfilled in your relationships, but today I want us to focus on the things that you right now can do to improve your lives and your baby's lives. We're going to set our goals and lay out a game plan for how to achieve them. She smiles expectantly. Yesenia slouches in her chair, her gold-digging aspirations deflated. All this talk of marriage is depressing. Angel is a kid. She doesn't want to get married, not yet, maybe not ever, not even to a Banana Republic model. She wants to be in her house, her own house, with her mother, wants to make hamburgers in the frying pan and eat them together out on their little concrete patio in the white plastic chairs that warp when you sit. They'd bring the whole jar of pickles, dig them out of the juice with their fingers, the way they used to before Mike moved in, and inform them it was disgusting. Number 7, she writes, my mom. I need my mom. I'll stop there.
Thank you. That was, I was laughing. I'm sure other people in our audience were, and we missed the room. Really got this sense of voice and humor of, can't wait for I'm going to suggest to my daughter that she read it. I'd love to see what she thinks. You're in that adolescent, post-adolescent world. But missed the room of the laughter. But I was laughing.
Oh, well, thank you.
And it was a surprise to me in a way, hearing it, because the stories in Night at the Fiestas are some of them so sharp and serious and menacing. I mean, I left the title story, 5 Wounds, just very concerned about Amadeo. Can you give us a little peek into his, so you gave us a glimpse of him, but what is it? You talked about some things that may not be familiar or people need to know about it, to be a penitente. I'm not saying it right.
Penitente.
Penitente, thank you.
Yeah, so,
Is that something that still is ongoing? Is that something you've seen, those kind of really intense pageants and passion plays?
It's a very old tradition, and it's still alive in today. There aren't a ton of people in the past. In the 19th century, the numbers numbered in the hundreds of membership in these brotherhoods, and they go back to the earliest communities of Spanish colonizers. There weren't enough priests for there to be a priest for every community, and so villages would share a priest, and in the meantime, they would take on some of the important roles that the church did. So they would bury the dead. They functioned as mutual aid societies. And they were really the living center of these villages, and these pageants were part of that ritual, and so it's a very old tradition, and it's still alive. But again, the numbers went way down in the early 20th century. Mm-hmm. There started to be these really salacious articles written about these processions by outsiders from, journalists from New York. Mm-hmm. And the church was embarrassed by it and outlawed it. And, and Amadeo is extreme. He asks for nails. That's not a part of it typically. Right. I mean, they're even in the the old days, there were maybe rumors that would happen, but there weren't like documented cases of an actual crucifixion. So this is Amadeo, who longs to transform his life. I mean, he wants to change. He wants to be a better father and a better son to his mother. And he thinks that this is the way to do it by he's given the role of Jesus and he wants to do the best job he can. And, of course he misses some of the point.
Right. And it's a really shocking turn of events. I want to encourage our audience to type in questions. Bergen will put them up on the screen. So go ahead and then type away any questions you have for Kirstin. I'm going to ask the loaded question now. You've been tagged fairly or not, and we've talked about it kind of almost ironically as a Catholic writer in some ways. And I know you don't want to, the religion, Catholicism, prevalent in your stories, and of course an overlay on New Mexican life for centuries, so really strong part of the culture. I know you don't want to talk about your personal faith, but it's also a bit about how your characters view faith, and also that you've now been invited to many Catholic sort of convocations and conferences. How does that world react? Because you're talking about teen pregnancies and some other, quite you wouldn't think of as like, oh, this is what we want to promote.
Well, I don't know that reading my book is promoting teen pregnancy necessarily.
No,
but
that you've had a Catholic conference and speaking as you have done. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it is absolutely a part of my identity and my sense of family history and family. Going to mass with my great grandmother and my grandmother was a big part of my life. And I also had this other influence in my life, which was, my dad's a geologist, and I had a poster of early man on my wall when I was a kid. And, so I had both of these. Oh, geez. Wow.
Yeah, we put that's your father on a field trip in Australia. Oh, we put up the embarrassing photos. I did.
You sure did. Yeah, that
was a quick shot. I don't know how that got in there. Sorry. I mean, to embarrass your father in the field.
Yeah. So I had all of these influences.
Both,
and
yeah.
Yeah, and I write about Catholic ritual. I am fascinated by it. I'm fascinated by the rich storytelling tradition. I'm really interested in questions of faith and doubt. So that, my fiction sometimes heads in that direction.
I read that you work, at least at that point, they said you work without an outline, that you write kind of organically. Is that still the case, even tackling the novel?
Gosh, I know writers who have an outline and they just work their way through it, and they get to the end of a book in a year. I know a writer who says, he's got his outline every day. He writes a page, and at the end of the year, he has a novel. I wish I worked that way, but I don't. The fact of the matter is, if I know where the story is going enough to have an outline, then I lose interest in the story. I've tried working from an outline, but it doesn't work. And what it means is that I'm following my characters, and often I'll take wrong turns, and I will have to, turn around and start again and forge another path.
Yeah.
It's not an efficient way of writing, but I've sort of accepted that it's the one I have.
Well, it doesn't matter how you get there. You're the end of your stories, your short stories. So concise at each one. I think Anthony Mara said, well, this is said, but in your case, very true. Each of your short stories has the weight of a novel. So outline or not, you get there, which I find.
Well, that's incredibly nice of Tony Mara.
Yeah. We have a question. We'll get some others, but because Kirstin, how's the process of turning your story into a novel changed the way you see not only your characters, but the larger world and their place in it? And that's from Mehdi.
Thanks, Mehdi. That's a good question. So The story itself is really, really focused on the family. Most of it takes place in the family home. I mean, not all of it. But it is complete. It's a smaller circumference. The novel, when I started exploring other points of view, once I was in Angel's point of view, and she spends her days at this teen parent program. And so she's got this whole social circle. She's got her social circle from the high school she left when she got pregnant. And, there's the broader circle of the family and the town. And so it did just grow. It grew to encompass more people. Yolanda, Amadeo's mother, is a point of view character, and she works at the State House, the Roundhouse, the Capitol building in Santa Fe, and so it encompasses her community as well. So, and that was a real pleasure of the writing the novel, is that there was more space to explore the communities that matter to these characters.
Well, and speaking about the weight of the novel, I understand that 70 copies arrived on the doorstep of Merrill House.
700.
I didn't know there was a picture, a pallet.
700. Yeah,
700.
They told me it was 1,052 pounds. The book.
My goodness.
So, yeah, there they are.
Where are they headed now? Do you have to schlep them back to Princeton and all over, or what?
Oh, thank God, no. No, I have to sign them, and then I guess they'll go back on a pallet and go away. Because now, with the pandemic, there aren't bookstore signings. So.
Well, of course, ordinarily we'd have a signing and sales of your book right now. So I would encourage our viewers to go to the site there, jamesmerrillhouse.org/JMH books. You can purchase the book through there. And certainly they're going to be at copies of The Five Wounds and Night at the Fiestas will be at Bank Square Books, and Savoy, our great local independent booksellers. So we always support them. And I hope we have some signed copies at Bank Square. So I hope we get some of those 1,072 copies.
So
I know that
great bookstores.
My wife's book group is reading. I don't know if they're online now. They're meeting this week. They've been reading Night at the Fiestas. So.
Oh, that's so kind.
Local readers. One of the things I was struck with in your work is this being a parent. I think you captured so well, certainly imperfect parenting, which I think all of us who are parents are imperfect, but the relations really resonate deeply for me. The father-daughter dynamic, the generational consequences. Can you talk about how you think and express that world of family and in your work?
I'm just fascinated by families. I mean, I'm fascinated by them. I'm fascinated by other people's families. I remember when I was a kid, I always wanted to go to friends' houses, and so I could see their families in action. And
sort of like a junior anthropologist, sociologist, or novelist, future novelist.
Yeah. And when I got to after my story collection came out, I realized, I think sometimes we writers don't always see what our obsessions are. And I knew I was interested in families, of course, but I was looking at the stories and every single one is about families. And I realized I never write about romantic relationships. And I thought, geez, that's kind of sad. So, so I set that as one of
that. There are kind of there are all kinds of relationships, but I hadn't noticed that there aren't romantic, because the other ones are so full that I hadn't missed that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just don't. And so I like to, when I start a new project, I like to set myself tasks and, assignments. And so one of the assignments I set myself is to write about romantic relationships. And so there's some romance in the novel.
Yeah, okay. Well, if you had time to work on, obviously you're probably very busy with the pre-publication kind of rush, and even in time of pandemic, there's so much around the publication of a book. Have you had time to write and work on anything while you're here?
There have been a lot of emails and Q&As and that kind of thing, but yeah, I have. I've been working on some new stories and a new project, and I mean, this space is just so heavenly, and the energy is so wonderful, and knowing that I'm inhabiting the space that was lived in not just by James Merrill, but so many writers I admire. It's thrilling. It's really thrilling.
Have you who are you reading? Do you make time for reading? And a lot of novelists don't read fiction while they're writing, but who are some of your favorites, and who do you make time for?
Oh gosh, every time I'm asked this question, my mind goes blank. I am. I'm reading Allie Smith's Winter right now, and she's really wonderful. She's nobody writes like her. She's completely original and marvelous.
Allie Smith.
Yeah, she has a quartet. Each novel is named after a season. And Autumn, I read Autumn, and that's gorgeous and moving. My mind is blank. I'm also reading Mr. Fox by Helen Oyemi. And it's another just formally fascinating book. It's so completely original and pretty exhilarating to read. I mean, somebody who's fiction, I write in a fairly traditional realist mode often. So it's thrilling to read this book, Mr. Fox.
Oh, well, they sound like both good recommendations. I've written them down. Do we have any other questions from our audience? I haven't seen any come in, but if not, we'll leave it there.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, pleasure to hear from you. I'm sorry we're missing out on the reception, but next time
we can raise some tea.
That's right. Well, and I want to thank Kirstin so much for being with us and sharing her new work with us. It was wonderful to hear, and I certainly look forward to reading The Five Wounds as soon as I can get my hands on it.
Well, thank you. And I'm just so grateful to the Stonington community for the warm welcome. And, it's strange times, and but I've felt so welcomed, and it's just such a joy to be here. So I'm grateful.
Oh, thank you. Well, we hope you can come back when we can gather more. And let's ask a final question, and it's from Stonington Cemetery, but I know that's an alias for someone who's been very involved with Merrill House over the years. It was funny to have the question come from the cemetery, isn't it? I kind of like that for last question. You deal with
I love that.
And on so many other, and death and ritual in your writing. I know everyone has asked this, but how did this year of isolation affect your writing?
I'm really glad that my book was at the stage it was at when this hit. So I was having to do some edits and copy edits, and I'm really glad that I had these sort of, important tasks, but they were very specific tasks because my concentration really suffered.
Oh.
It's gotten better, thank goodness, as the pandemic has dragged on. But and I am really loving writing stories and finding a really nice comfort and escape in the world of these news stories. But I wouldn't say that the pandemic was great for my writing in general.
Mm-hmm. And Zoom teaching?
I am on leave this semester or this year, so I haven't had to do much of it. I mean, in the spring, of course, last spring, but yeah.
Well, good. Well, good luck with the launch, and we'll be looking for you. I know you have other online appearances coming up with Alice Dermott and others. So we'll be seeing a lot more of you online and in the bookstores. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. This was really a pleasure.
Great. I just want to mention that our next Merrill event is May 1st, and we'll have Marlon James, New York Times bestselling novelist, will deliver the annual Merrill Lecture. So that'll be May 1st. And if you have time, Kirstin, I hope you can tune in. I don't know if you know Marlon and his work, but
definitely, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, and good night.
The first writers in residence came to the James Merrill House 25 years ago, shortly after James Merrill's death in 1995. Since then, over 80 writers have visited, staying in his home, a National Historic Landmark, to work on projects of their own. Thanks to Merrill's generosity, the house now belongs to the Stonington Village Improvement Association and is an ongoing inspiration for writers and poets from around the world. For more information, visit our website, jamesmerrillhouse.org. Thank you.